Good morning. Welcome back to the Higher Grounds podcast. This is your morning minute meditation for this morning. We have been over 8 points in 1 Peter chapter 4. We've been dealing with the believer learning how to live in light of the last days. We have looked at several things in these verses. As a matter of fact, the first 11 verses, we've looked at the believers to live very victoriously, very spiritually, very consciously, very seriously, very charitably, generously, stewardably, and lastly, we dealt with responsibly. That was at least 8 things that we've already looked at, and there's 2 more that we'll look at in these verses. This morning, I want to look at verses 12 through 14, and I'll give you another thought that the Lord has placed upon our heart for these lessons that we've learned in living in light of the last days. Look at verse number 12. Beloved, think it not strange concerning the fiery trials, which is to try you, as though some strange things happen unto you. But rejoice insomuch as you are partakers of Christ's suffering, that when his glory shall be revealed, you may be glad also with exceeding joy. If ye be reproached for the name of Christ, happy are ye, for the Spirit of glory and of God resteth upon you. On their part he is evil spoken of, but on your part he is glorified. Our 9th point this morning in this thought is we are to live expectantly. Peter was telling them that persecution and suffering was coming. Not only it was coming, but it will come. It's not a matter of if, but it's a matter of when. We are to expect troubles in this walk of life. Matter of fact, Job said it right in Job 14:1. Man that is born of woman is a few days and full of trouble. Job said the few days that we have here on earth, those few days are full of trouble. And so the religious crowd is going to tell you not to expect trouble because they preach a prosperity gospel. We know them as name it, claim it. But I made a statement the other week. They're blabbing it and grabbing it. And so we know that persecution is going to come. There's a promise in the Word of God that persecution is going to come. There's the reality of suffering in verse number 12. He said, think it not strange. In other words, it shouldn't surprise us that suffering comes our way. The word not strange means that the persecution, the trials, and the suffering that we're going through should not be strange to us. We should be surprised if we don't have suffering, if there is not persecution. So there's the reality of suffering. The reality is this: suffering is very painful. Then you'll find, secondly, not only the reality of suffering, but there's rejoicing in suffering. Verse number 13, he used the word rejoice. That means to be cheerful, it means to be happy, and it means to be glad. There's 2 things that we're to rejoice in our suffering, and one was our fellowship. He said we're partakers of Christ's suffering. Then he said of our future. He said that when his glory shall be revealed, ye shall be glad with exceeding joy. Then thirdly, there's the reproach of our suffering in verse number 14. Peter moves from the reality of our suffering to the rejoicing of our suffering to the rewarding of our suffering. The persecution of our suffering, there's the reproach for the name of Christ. There's the prosperity of our suffering. He said, happy are ye. And then you'll find the power of our suffering. He said this, for the Spirit of glory and of God resteth upon you. And so we find that our suffering in life is going to come, and there's going to be hard times, there are going to be trials, there are going to be persecution, they're going to come, but then he's going to give us power when those persecutions come. And then he said our part, now be done. He said on their part, he's evil spoken of, but on your part, he is glorified. So I want you to think on these things this morning.